Hello, everyone. Welcome to Next Big Future. I have my friend Randy Kirk with me. We're going to be talking about uh, nuclear power and how it could power the AI energy boom that we have. So I have some slides and then we'll discuss along the way. So let me get into that right now. So it was an interview with Mark Andreessen where he talked about Project Independence, which was Richard Nixon having the idea that we should have 1,000 nuclear reactors to get off our dependence on foreign oil. But Nixon also created the Environmental Protection Agency and then created the Nuclear Regulatory Commission as a replacement to the Atomic Energy Commission. And both those two agencies have crippled all advancement in nuclear power since they were created.
And the idea was not a lot different than our whole idea right now with Tony Seba and solar. The idea
Mhm.
was that nuclear could basically replace all other power sources and be less expensive
Mhm.
than existing power sources. Basically, get down. I was reading this another place. That is where the term "too cheap to meter" first was used, was because they believed that nuclear would make electricity too cheap to meter.
And Archivist discussed that we had through the 50s, 60s, and 70s gotten to 104 reactors. We since slowly shut down 10 of them to get to 94. And that if we had continued the build out of nuclear power, that cost of energy was on this downward increasing path until the stopping of building new nuclear power as competition to the fossil fuels. And so we could have had 4 times cheaper energy, which would have made everything cheaper, our economy bigger and stuff like that. Because there was a correlation between energy prices and GDP. It's a very tight correlation that we have.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So, but we're in a new age now. So let's forget about the spilt milk under the bridge. There is a bunch of new ways we can build a lot of nuclear reactors. Here is a vision of Copenhagen Atomics, which wants to make a molten salt reactor. So most current nuclear reactors are boiler water reactors or pressure water reactors where they have fuel that's generally fuel rods, right? They take the uranium and you mix with some other metals, and then you have a fuel rod, which is like a long javelin. Molten salt would be a melted metal, right? Which can have many advantages in terms of like less waste and as well as higher energy density, cleaner fuel, a lot of other things. Just for people who don't know, nuclear waste is basically primarily by weight, 95, 98% uranium 238, right? So you have uranium 235, that's what is generally used for fuel in the nuclear fission reactors, and 238 is what is left over. The reason being is that it's easier to split odd number isotopes. So when you left an even number, it's tougher to split. It is not impossible to split. You just have to have fast neutrons, which when you split the nucleus apart, protons and neutrons go away. The neutrons go at a certain speed. Slow versus fast. Fast neutrons are about 100 times faster, 10,000 times more energy. So basically, you hit the nucleus with a faster neutron, you will split it, which can be done with certain versions of the molten salt and other types of reactors. So here in this picture, so you'll notice that they have many rows of double uh, shipping container size things, kind of like mega packs.
Okay.
So each one of those gray rows is two nuclear, each one of them has a mini nuclear reactor, right? And they just build a bunch of them so they would be factory mass producing them, in shipping container form. So if I'm getting 1 gigawatt out of 30 rows, each one is on the order of 40 megawatts, right? And then you'd mass produce them in a factory and then you'd lay them out this way. I will come back and discuss molten salt reactors, other reactors. I'll first discuss and Copenhagen Atomics had the goal of making a large nuclear reactor a day. Um, or
So now,
maybe yeah, go ahead.
we should, I think, stop here just for a second too, to talk about the idea of factory produced versus bespoke produced, that
Hmm.
when you're factory producing them, now you can get the approval by regulatory agencies for the factory product.
Right,
Once you have the approval of the factory product, now you can just spit them out and take them to wherever you're going to use them, whether that's below ground, whether that's above ground, whether that's, whatever it is.
right,
So, so now that reduces the cost of regulation and the time of the regulation.
right.
And by going into production, you should be able to reduce the overall cost of the actual product itself as well.
It's also the size of these things. So a regular nuclear power plant that we currently have is very large, like thousands of tons. It's the size of a small, not even small, a big building, right? Plus it has a containment dome that weighs 600 tons of metal, right? So everything about it is big and heavy and difficult to build. Thus, they have taken, with excessive regulation, 20 years to build in some cases. Um, and then, but the previous, when they first started, they were like coal plants and they were completing in 4 years. And the time it takes China or South Korea to make a nuclear reactor is 4 years. So the old style reactors can be built in 4 years and only balloons to 10 years or 20 years when you throw on a bunch of regulation that does not protect you. When I say it doesn't protect you, in that in the all those reactors made in the 50s, 60s, and 70s are still around, running for 42 years. And we've only had the few accidents, right? So people say, oh, well, it's so terrible, the accidents. We've had bigger accidents with oil and with coal
Right.
all the time, every day.
Building bridges, building dams.
Building dams. Also, the dams themselves have broken.
Right.
A dam broke in China that killed 250,000 people.
A dam broke in Culver City in the 1930s, an
Right.
earthen dam, and wiped away half the city, and a whole bunch of people were killed.
Right. So all of these energy sources have deaths and problems, but people only remember the nuclear ones for some reason, right?
Well,
Because of
because we were
fear.
all hiding under our desks in the 50s and 60s, Brian. So
Right.
there's this fear that's been built into our brains.
Right. Even though like every day, coal and oil kill more people than the entire history of nuclear power, right?
Right.
And that's it goes to a death per terawatt hour, which I helped popularize that concept. I wrote a bunch of articles about it like 50 years ago. Okay, um, so we will get into that. That basically nuclear is clean, it's safe already. New things will make it even cleaner and safer.
And
Um,
to put an exclamation point on what you said a minute ago, this factory could build one a day of
right,
these, not 4 years from now, but every day they'd be pumping out another one.
right. And then you have more factories and build more. And
Right.
several other approaches involve more mass production. So the demand, the reason we need all this stuff, especially now, is because of AI. That companies like xAI, OpenAI, Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, they're all Google making massive data centers. Here is a Photoshop from SemiAnalysis, a analysis of semiconductors, showing the site where the Memphis xAI data center is. This is where the 100,000, 200,000 chips for the computing the Grok model are at. Up above, so the white is the building, and above there are a bunch of gas power plants. That's with the red outline. And then the green outline has a bunch of megapacks to balance the energy. So this was a few months ago. They had 100 megawatts of on-site power. They've probably increased that to more, and they have backup power from the battery storage to balance it out. What xAI did, and they're also going to make a future electric substation for 100 megawatt capacity, is they took a old Electrolux factory, which is near a 1.1 gigawatt gas power plant, about a mile away. And so they're able to get a lot of gas power near them, and then they have a lot of gas nearby where they can power uh, these turbines that they're bringing, mobile turbines. They're just buying a bunch of mobile turbines and just putting it into the parking lot near them in order to get ahead. Like, as opposed to building permanent structures, building a permanent power plant, Elon's doing a quick and fast approach
Mhm.
to getting this stuff built up. So, like again, existing substations, existing wire lines, gas lines, and then using all that power. So this would suggest that in that 1.1 gigawatt level to maybe 2 gigawatt levels might be how the energy cap out for this facility. Um, so 40,000, no, sorry, um, it's 500,000 of the um, NVIDIA B200 chips would get you to the 1.1 gigawatt level, right?
Mhm.
So in order to get to a million chips of the new NVIDIA kind, you may either need a more efficient version of NVIDIA chip or your own more efficient Dodo chip, or you would have to get more power. But you generally want more power. Um, Gigawatt beyond a gigawatt is difficult, but with a lot of effort and money, you can do it. But they're putting in tons of money into these kinds of facilities. Um, OpenAI Microsoft is building multiple buildings for theirs. So the difference with the XAI one is that they're putting 100,000, 2,000 chips, maybe a million chips into one building with one memory that looks at the other ones are splitting it up where they're doing some parts of the model build in one building, communicating to another building as fast as possible, but doing things that are logically separated. Um, so within 2.5 years, they've been working on for maybe a year. OpenAI, Microsoft are putting in Wisconsin a 1.5 gigawatt facility with multiple buildings. They've had construction permits for 10 data centers. Four are in the 300 megawatt range.
Wow.
Google has, again, multiple buildings, 400 megawatts in Ohio. To train Gemini, they expand that to 540 megawatts. Um, Google was the first one to use chilled water cooling for theirs. XAI did also water cooling. The other ones have done air cooling. Um, Google's been using liquid cooling for 10 years with their TPUs. So this is going back now so the AI thing has a huge demand. The so you got to order. The spending has been the major players in 2024, Microsoft, OpenAI, Google, Meta, Amazon, et cetera, spent roughly about $140 billion, $130 billion out of $235 billion estimate for the world.
Mm,
And then we're going to 2025 to 380 billion.
mm.
Microsoft has announced spending $80 billion on theirs, which may not include CoreWeave or some other companies that they have association with. And then Google, Meta would likely increase from the 2024 spend into the 20, 30, $50 billion ranges. And then could be other construction from or another funding from Saudi Arabia, Emirates, other nations, and other things. And plus, but they need to start making money, but they'll spend ahead of it. Like they spent all this money, but they only made, say, $10 billion in 2024.
Right.
But they're assuming that they'll increase in 2025, 2026 to $100 billion, $200 billion, pay off the 2024 spend 2 years later. So they kind of will have a lag in terms of how much money they build. But then can build faster if they convince governments to to put more money in to it. But currently, they're heading up to incremental free cash flow.
Right.
All the incremental free cash flow of these super rich companies is now going towards AI instead of just stacking up in cash. So, so that's an approximation that when you want to approximate future AI spending for 2025, 2026, it would be all free cash flows of those companies plus whatever loans they're willing to take or other people willing to give them or whatever grants some country is willing to give them. Back to nuclear. So they want nuclear, they want all this power, solar, batteries, plus mainly it's natural gas. So natural gas is the easiest one to do, and even though you may have solar and batteries supplementing it, it's primarily a natural gas thing. Natural gas being twice as clean as coal, but also just easy to ramp up. I can just pump more natural gas through the pipeline to my location versus having to make a rail line to move thousands of tons of coal. Okay, so back to Copenhagen Atomics. So they're looking to have these on the truck units, but they'll look to put a bunch of them together. They're looking to use thorium. Thorium, when it shifts out, you can get your thorium from uranium 233 or get some shifts between those two things. So thorium and uranium kind of are almost twins that way, but thorium is more abundant, and it is possible to get even lower cost with thorium. But be a new fuel cycle, it will take time to create. But there are advantages to it down the road. Um, it can be the lowest cost of energy. Copenhagen Atomics wants to do no taxpayer investments. They will be able to burn nuclear waste. That nuclear waste, remember, is uranium 238. So
Yeah.
if you have the right reactor, you can split uranium 238, and their reactor can do that. Other ones can also do it. Um, so 10 times more energy can be extracted from nuclear fuel in the Copenhagen atomic reactor than classical reactors. That's because if I have an enrichment and get up to 10% 235, mixing it in, then I can burn up 10% of the mass. But if I can
Mm,
then use the 238, I can use 90% more. So then I can
mm,
do 10 times more. So just a matter of which kind of stuff you're doing. They are mass producing molten salt loops. So they're already mass producing certain components and they're selling them to universities to train them up and do other things.
wow.
This was the CapEx thing discussion and the money. Okay, so China, the US made a molten salt reactor in the 1960s. Um, China has just built one, but they both were small, megawatt, but still megawatt being, you know, done the times more than you use for your home. And they built it in a test reactor form very quickly. So unlike nuclear fission, you can build things quickly, physically. Technically, there's nothing wrong with it. You can just, and it will just work, right? So there's no issues with that. Um, and I'm going to talk later about a 1 megawatt version of molten reactor to be completed next year in Texas.
Mm,
And a company that also wants to mass produce these things. Another company making molten reactors is called Thorcon. Um, so they want to mass produce them by taking a shipbuilding methodology, building, so you make ships out of large modules, 100-ton modules to assemble a large oil tanker or a container ship. The founders were involved in making ships that way, so they know that can be done. And then the steam module part of the reactor is the same as for a coal plant or a coal plant. All the converting of power to heat power into electricity is standardized. So
mm,
that's just how fast can you build that piece. And then the nuclear module is what's different. They're talking to Indonesia and some other countries on the first reactor. They've been going through that discussion for years. But and Indonesia is uh, wanting to do it. Indonesia, for people don't know, is a country with over 200 million people that has many islands. So they would want power on many islands. So they are favorable to doing this. Their economy is also growing quite well, 5 to 6% GDP growth, which is about 2 to 3 times more than a Western country. Not quite as good as China's heyday, but pretty good. Um, so they need more power. So, but a lot of people would need a lot of power and they would want to, like put it onto a coastal thing on an island someplace. Their goal is to get to 40 gigawatts per year by 2050
mm,
and deploy 400 gigawatts, which would be double, equivalent to all the nuclear power built in the world today is about
mm,
400 gigawatts. 100 gigawatts in the United States, 60 gigawatts in China, 50 gigawatts in France, etc.
mhm,
So this is the Texas company. So they call Natura. So they had the idea to build a molten salt reactor in 2023. They completed the building to put it into. They're going to stick. This is a basement area where they're going to lower the small reactor. The molten salt reactors are very energy dense, so smaller than the other ones, a standard reactor that we have. But you discussed the military aspect. If you made a military version of a molten salt reactor, you can make it far smaller than the nuclear submarine reactors. It'd be like 10 times, 50 times smaller than
Hmm.
that potentially. Um, so they want to complete the first reactor in 2026
Wow.
in Texas, the a 1 megawatt version, and then have a 100 megawatt version by 2030. This thing would be the person would be about one third the height of this thing. So again, this a molten salt chamber would be very small. The reason it would be super safe is on the base they would have a metal plug, so that the reactor would say operate at 500 degrees Celsius or like close to 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Metal, if you have the right metal, could melt at like 1,000 degrees Celsius or something. So you could have the plug where it would be made of a metal that would melt at a lower temperature than regular steel. You have the alloy and get the precise amount of temperature to melt at. So then people worried about a runaway reaction where temperature gets too high and stuff like that. But if the plug is, I don't want to go over 800 degrees. It would be bad for me to do that. Instead of like flooding it with water and trying to cool it down,
Mhm.
the plug would just melt. So there's no electronics. I had to push something to disable something. It would just physically melt and then it would go into a pan below and then it would just spread out and cool down. So
So
then it'd be
the sand itself would no longer
molten metal, molten
no longer
metal.
be contained in a small space. As it
Yeah.
spreads out, then the nuclear reaction stops.
The reaction just stops and just cools down. It stops and cools down, right? Because it's spread out. So thus it's um, by physics walk away safe. So no one could be there and it will still stop.
Right.
Another company is called Deep Fission. They want to take the classic pressure water reactor, which is the main reactor, like 70%, 80% of the reactor in the world are this, where they take boiling water, but you keep it into like a pressure cooker that keeps, doubles the temperature so you can get more efficiency out of it. Um, so they would have water and steam and cables lowering this thing into boreholes, and each hole would be about a kilometer down, and the reactor inside would generate 15 megawatts.
So,
They've
so,
already, Mhm.
so I'm a little bit behind you. So
Yeah,
the nuclear reaction is taking place in the hole.
in the reactor in the hole, this little pill thing, electricity provides steam sent to surface in a borehole tubing. So you have a little reactor that's sent underground into a tube, so that if
And
something went wrong, it's down a big hole and it's contained.
and how does it get to the water to heat the water up?
They have a pipe that's sending
Going
water
down
down,
into, I see,
steam comes up.
I see.
Yeah. So
Okay.
in the picture here, they have the water coming down
Right.
and then steam going up, and then they have lifting cables to lift this thing up or down.
Okay.
So just a different configuration of a known technology, a different
Sure.
size. So Deep Fission has done a deal with Endeavor. Endeavor is making data centers. They want to make 2 gigawatts of these kinds of reactors, um, which would be, say, 100 holes, and then you'd have 1.5 gigawatts.
Hmm.
So that is how they plan to scale with that bunch of holes going deep down. But these holes wouldn't be very big. It would be, like a an oil pipeline hole where I'm
Yep. Yep.
digging. So it would be very similar. So those are what about three or four different technologies that can go to mass production. These companies are looking at 2029, 2030 for their first reactors, which is bold for the nuclear industry because normally, especially Western countries, you would say, okay, we need to take 10 years to build this thing or something like that. But um, with deregulation coming, with the new presidential administration, and with um, the demand from tech companies that need a lot of this power, things can move a lot faster.
And so the original, what I remember, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, because again, I've mentioned my dad was kind of in this business on the transformer side, what I recall was the idea was to potentially put these container sized or even maybe half container, short container, the 20-foot container, put them into residential neighborhoods, uh, sealed in concrete, where you would only have to open the concrete box once every 25 years to regenerate or refeed or change the feedstock or whatever. And so it'd be encased in concrete. Then you'd have the steel, encasement. I guess using this pebble technology or some of these other technologies that you're talking about now would already be 100% safe anyway, but the concrete would give maybe people peace of mind. Any thoughts? Has all that kind of concept for mini nukes been dropped, or is that still on the
Well,
table too?
that is the borehole thing where they're just digging
Ah,
down in and putting the reactor into it. Many other reactor companies, nuclear fission companies, have the concept of the whole small contained thing in a shipping container that would stay enclosed. So it'd be like a replaceable battery. So
right.
I wouldn't say take the fuel out. I would say I would take the whole module
The whole
away
thing.
in a shipping container, drive it away, and then deal with it at some remote site
Right.
but I would just replace it with another one. So you factory
Right.
mass producing them. It's like I'm making rail cars for trains, making buses, or I'm making some of them are the size of airplanes. Like we
Right.
make several thousand passenger planes a year of the complexity of a nuclear power plant. And then you could then just mass produce them by the thousands, and then um, they're movable so that you can move them in and out of wherever they need to be.
Yeah, so the nuclear solution, it was so the concept of what Bill O'Reilly used to say, all of the above, and I think that's been picked up by a lot of senators and congressmen, whatever, but the all of the above concept, um, is that the right concept, or is it all of the smart stuff above? So that some stuff might not be smart to continue to really develop. Let's say coal, for instance, might not be smart to continue to develop when you've got natural gas, fracking, nuclear, solar. You don't like wind, so maybe wind isn't smart. What do you think? Is there only certain of these that probably should, or should the market decide?
So I've looked at this stuff a lot. You can,
I know
in
you
the
have.
near term, you can do like more natural gas, like that's what we're doing right now,
Right.
right? And you can, if needed, take more coal to your existing coal plants. China has continued to make more coal plants. Coal is basically burnable dirt, right? So it's if I can take up dirt and to find the ones that burnable, I can then run my reactor. It's why it was cheap. It's why China built its economy upon cheap energy with cheap coal, right?
Right.
But it burned it completely, so you are killing a few 100,000 of your people every year when you do that. It's a
Okay.
problem,
That's a
and
problem.
so people don't like to do it. But so nuclear can be completely clean, where basically the leftover fuel, particularly if it's 238, you can use up almost all of it. And that's also the long-lived part. So you're just left with stuff that's maybe a few decades of containment, which we've already contained
Right.
this stuff for a few decades. And basically, if you don't come in contact with it, it does not cause you any damage, right?
Right.
It's like it's sitting over there 100 miles away in its containers sitting in the area the size of a basketball court. If it doesn't get damaged, nothing happens. And again, most of the time over the last, almost all the time over the last 7 years, no containment has been broken. And so you don't have to hold it for thousands of years if you
Right.
just use the 238. So in terms of the best solutions are the nuclear fission, solar, and battery. Those are the best ones. Um, Hydro is okay too, but again, we don't have areas to build a lot more. So you can build a bit more of some of these other things, but in terms of getting to what we need for AI, we're heading to a place right now where it uses about 800 terawatt hours. So we're up to about 3%, 5% of global energy for that. But we're heading to doubling and more, and it may need by 2040s double the entire world's power, right? So that means we need 10 times more nuclear power than we have today, or, 10 times more solar, wind, or a combination of those things. And even if we wanted to build that much coal would take longer, right? So because we're building a lot of things fast with these data centers, you know, there'll be an all of the above initially, but it will rapidly go to just nuclear and just solar and battery. So the next few years, solar and battery and gas, and then
Nuclear.
when nuclear comes out, nuclear replace the natural gas part, and then it'll be nuclear mass produced with that. And it'll be a combination initially of nuclear fission. If we ever figure out nuclear fusion, then we can do that. But we can run our civilization on nuclear power at 10 times, 100 times the current level for millions of years. The reason being is that the oceans have 3 to 4 billion tons of uranium in the oceans. And there have been work done to get that uranium out of the ocean. It's just at about like 50% more cost than mining it on land. So we've gotten that cost down. It's proven. Then you can just stick these things that absorb that material, and then you could, get out a lot of, like a 3 billion tons. I can take out 100,000 tons, a year. And then if I use all of it up instead of like just a percentage, then I can have 20 times the power, and then that would last for 30,000 years. But then erosion from the rivers would take in, because it's in the crust, would just take in more uranium and thorium into it, so then you can again continue to use that. So it is a civilization powering thing at high power levels for that.
So considering the need we have for electricity, the likelihood that nuclear is going to be deregulated and that nuclear is going to become even as big or bigger than solar, is this in any way connected to the decision to try to buy Greenland and merge with Canada, given that Greenland and Canada have massive known reserves of uranium?
That's a separate Arctic Cold War. China, Russia, United States are competing for the Arctic region. Um, because of the receding polar ice, there is shipping lanes that are opening up
Oh, I
above.
knew about that part. I'm asking about the uranium.
So yes, uranium's there, but it's not needed. There's
Okay.
uranium all over the planet. We don't need
Okay.
that, uranium, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and then again, it's just you buy it and it's cheap. The fact that any limitations around uranium are just because we haven't bothered to look for it, because we already have enough lying around. So it's like, okay, I don't need to look for it. I would like
Oh,
to find a nice deposit of it, but it's not needed.
I got
Yeah,
it. Okay. All right.
yeah.
Good. Well, yeah, I appreciate the shipping lane thing as long as you brought it up, though. I worried that if global warming um, slow down reverses, when those shipping lanes just close up again.
Yeah, yeah. So if things got colder, then shipping lanes would close up. And just as a separate thing, I'm not sure how much we discussed there was a talk by Mark Andreessen
Yeah.
with Heritage Foundation where he discussed the Nixon plan to have 1,000 reactors, and they also discussed how there are um, nuclear reactors in the United States Navy. Every
Right.
aircraft carrier, every submarine,
Right.
most Russian submarines, most Chinese submarines have them. They're small reactors, about 100 megawatts, and they're very dense, and they're easily operated by um, uh, Navy sailors who are just out of high school, right? They're able to run these reactors for months at a time, so they're very safe. Uh, so
What about drones? Did you put a little tiny nuclear reactor in a drone? Is there
um,
such a thing as a little tiny nuclear reactor, like a battery?
For fission, if you're doing like a straight up actually doing fission, there is a
Yeah.
critical mass. You may have
Okay.
heard of critical mass that
Right. Yeah.
you can't
Yeah.
get down below a certain size.
Okay.
Although if you can go smaller if you were to like hit it with an accelerator with
Mhm.
particles to boost the reaction, so they can make it smaller that way. Or you can just do isotopes where it's just naturally, plutonium or something like that giving off things. So then that's what they run spaceships with, where they have a plutonium battery that goes off into space, powers the thing for decades, because they're taking like 100 watts of this, because you have a kilogram or something of plutonium or something like that. So you can have other isotopes that can be your nuclear battery. Um, and then small reactors getting below about 10 kilowatts is not particularly practical.
What about
Uh,
what's that? What is that in size and weight?
so there's something called the trusty reactor that NASA made, which you would have something, probably the size of this that would you would in be the fuel that you push into a reactor. So you would have a little bit of uranium already. You add your extra bit of uranium, and then together you get to critical mass. So then you start a nuclear reaction while the thing is inserted, and then you can remove it. So again, it would not be as powerful. Like I said, it's about 10 kilowatts. They're talking
Right.
about 40 kilowatt things. So it's far less than the megawatts of the bigger
Right.
reactors,
Right.
but it would be designed to run just at criticality in order to generate power.
What's
So these are new
so
designs that they have that would again play to physics.
so if you're talking about though wanting to keep a drone in the air forever,
Yeah.
you want a stationary drone just flying up there for the next 10 years, you
Mhm.
could get that drone up there using some other kind of power, maybe if necessary, if it wasn't enough to get it into the air, but then it would sustain it for the 10 years.
Well, the molten salt reactors, if I make an advanced form, so I don't go for the easiest, fastest like these ones where I just want to make power and make it cheap,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
If I say I want to have it high performance
Mm.
and have it very energy dense, then it is possible to make a molten salt reactor that would be, say, the size of a dishwasher, right?
Okay.
That could generate 100 megawatts, right? It'd be ultra dense. It'd be like um, one, the materials are dense, but the energy density would be really high. So I think I haven't looked at it in a while, but it was like 100 kilowatts per kilogram or something like that. So you can get really high densities if you make an advanced form of these reactors.
Wow.
And but by doing that, if you have a power to weight ratio, where you're getting like 4 kilowatts per kilogram or 10 kilowatts per kilogram, you can start engineering amazing things like flying drones, flying planes that are nuclear powered. You could have like that in the Avengers Marvel movies, you have the flying aircraft carrier.
Yeah. Yeah.
You could do that. I did an article describing how you could use molten salt reactors to make a flying helicarrier, aircraft carrier, right? The issue with that is I need like 100 gigawatts. So I'd
Yeah.
be putting in loads of power, 100 gigawatts, which is
Yeah.
the entire power of the United States in nuclear today, into an aircraft carrier, which a flying aircraft carrier, which is just as vulnerable to being shot down.
Right. Right. Yes. Yes.
So then yes, you super carry until glass chin, you hit it, and then it would come down, and hey, I just lost 100 gigawatts.
Yeah.
But in an energy abundant world,
Right.
where we got terawatts up the wazoo, 100 gigawatts in the air, because I want to fly with my nuclear aircraft carrier. I want to, make a nuclear spaceship that goes off, flying off. Because it doesn't have to just fly on Earth. It's got the power. You just keep going and going.
Yeah.
Which is there's a Japanese anime with a flying nuclear
I,
battleship or something like that. So those kind of things are possible because you have nuclear power that is thousands of times as energy dense as chemicals,
right.
right? So, and I've again written many articles around different configurations around that. And you can go up to like, 2%, 5% speed of light, all kind of things, which Kennedy, when they had the Project Orion, where I had small nuclear bombs,
Yeah.
and they would drop them through a big hole, and then it would
Yeah.
pulse the ship up. So
Yeah.
there's a video showing them using C4 to prove that this thing would work.
Yeah.
Um, Kennedy said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have a nuclear battleship and that kind of thing. But it was technically feasible. They could have done it. You could have been landing on Saturn, landing on the moon and Mars, all kind of things with nuclear ships. So if we go down that way, it's not that the technology couldn't do it. It's whether we choose
One.
to do it. Yeah, want to do it. But we want to do trillions of dollars for the AI. So that will make us go down this route of developing the clean nuclear so that we have super intelligence and everyone's rich, 100 times richer, et cetera. Yeah.
All right. Well, one more way where wealth is going to be coming our way shortly.
Right, right. And just by wealth, like the energy being 10 times cheaper, we'll also again get wealthier. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So great talking, and we'll join us again next time. Follow us on Patreon and our channels, and talk to you next time. Bye bye.